Welcome to Feel Good Friday here on 411 Outdoors. Today, we're going to be looking at a knife that is a knockoff version of an All-American Classic. And if you're having trouble affording this All-American Classic, maybe this is an option for you. Stick around. Nothing feels better than a good deal. And the reason why I'm making this video is because I personally am a big fan of the classic Buck 124 Frontiersman. But the Frontiersman will cost you about $185 to $200 if you want to get it. What I'm going to put on display in this video is a very similar version of that knife made from Wa-Revo, and it looks a lot like it. What I don't want is to make it seem like I'm comparing this knife to the Buck 124. If you've got the wallet and you like this design, definitely get that good classic Buck. But I want to show you this one from Wa-Revo. Pull this out and put it on display here. Looks very similar. Now there are some differences. It's not a complete replica by no means. In fact, when we put these side by side, what you'll see is the version from Wa-Revo is a little bit bigger. The blade is longer, but they look a lot alike. The handles aren't the exact same color. Here's your Buck 124. It's also a lot thicker than this one here. In fact, let's put these two side by side. You can see the difference between the thickness of the handles. The Buck 124 is a thicker handle than the one here from Wa-Revo. You obviously get a different sheath as well. This is the Buck 124 sheath, whereas this is the one you get with the Wa-Revo knife. This Wa-Revo knife is listed as full tang, but when you look at the construction and you look at the very tip there, this is not constructed the same as this one. This Buck 124 was set apart from other models like the 119 and the 120 because of its full tang construction. This one tried to follow a similar pattern, and I'll be fair and go along with the specifications of it being full tang, but there are some differences. For example, if you look at this, you know, it's not the same end as this one. You can see the tang running through that buck right there. This one looks like it runs all the way down to right here, and I'm sure there's some inner workings on the inside of this, but it's still a little different. That being said, it still appears to have a solid construction. A lot of people may actually like the thinness of this handle, because I've talked to some people in the comments about the thickness of this 124, and they don't like it. It's a very, very, very thick, robust handle, whereas this one, you know, you can engulf it with your hand. It's a lot thinner. I mean, it's not like too thin, but it's definitely a lot different than grabbing this Buck. This does feel pretty dang sharp right out of the box. Let's just do a little paper cutting. Let's lay into a piece of this cardstock. There's a few other things I'll point out here. This does have a sharp spine. If you're going to do any ferro rod striking, this is a very sharp spine to be able to do that. These are big skinning knives. That's why people get these. These are typically taking out for hunting, the way they're built, the way they're designed. But, you know, you can use this big old blade for anything. It's definitely got some swing to it. It's like practically having a machete in your hand. That's a whole lot of blade. And you can even get down on the end of this handle if you wanted to get a really wide swing for a chop. Round about the same thickness as the Buck 124. The 124 seems to be maybe a tad thicker, but not thick enough to talk about. I don't think either of these are 5 millimeters thick. I believe this one's around 4.8 if I remember correctly. This one is probably around 4.5, but you know, these are skinning blades. You know, you don't want the thickest blade out there on the market anyway for something that's made for slicing, delicate slicing. You could obviously skin a massive piece of game with this very easily, and that's really what this is made for. My approach to knife reviews is really changing, and my thought process behind what is necessary in a review is really changing. For example, a while back, I reviewed a knockoff of the Buck 119. It's the Gordon Bowie knife, and I did a tip torture test on that review. That blade is not even designed for that. I wished I had not done that in that video. I was just so caught up in the typical run-of-the-mill YouTube bushcraft review. The Buck 119 and the knockoff version from Gordon is clearly not designed for doing tip torture. Those are slicing blades. Those blades are taken with you on the hunt. They're amazing skinning knives, and you can also do other really good slicing tasks with those blades. But you don't see a lot of people taking knives that are built like this one that I'm reviewing and the Buck 119 and going out and doing hardcore bushcraft tasks, splitting wood. Although you can, it's just, if you're going to do something with a knife, get a knife that is made for that task. For example, some of these Becker knives from Ka-Bar, they are so strong and so thick, and they are built for all out torture, whether it's hardcore splitting, hardcore prying. That's what those knives are made for. A blade like this is not so much built for that as much as it is being able to slice very effectively, being thinner, being very sharp, and being just curved and designed for that. You wouldn't tip torture a blade that's not really designed to be used as a tip torture knife. The torture test that I did on the Cold Steel SRK just brought me to a lot of these conclusions. I was trying to show the volatility of the handle, but in the end, I was putting it through tasks that it ultimately wasn't built for. Not only slicing, but I think about the carving capabilities of this. It's, you know, obviously can dig in very well. This blade can cut in for carving and things like that. So definitely has a nice edge. I know you probably want to see it be thrown. Pretty good balance. It's got a decent weight to it. It's not as heavy as you think. I didn't see it in the specifications. I think it's around 12 ounces. But, you know, I don't see something like this as being good for chopping heavy things, you know, doing heavy chopping. But, you know, if you wanted to clear limbs, you know, something like that's going to be fine. If you're just clearing a path, it'll work really well for you. Looks like it's got about the same size fang or choil on the bottom. This is the 124. This is the Wa-Revo. They look to be about the same size. The Wa-Revo one has a bit of a sharper point there. All right, let's bring this to a conclusion here. This looks a lot like the Buck 124. If you can't afford the Buck, this is a decent knockoff version. It's even a little bit bigger. Seems to be built very solid, just a big old slicing machine. You can get out and do a lot of things with it. You know, a lot of people buy the Buck 124 because it's so beautiful. They don't use it. I've talked to a lot of people who have the knife. They just don't use it. Something like this, you can get out and use. You can beat it to death if you want to. A lot of people pay $185 for the Buck 124. They just don't want to mess with it. They don't want to get it scratched up. Yeah, this just gives you a similar aesthetic and feel to the Frontiersman, with the exception of the handle being a little bit more slim, of course. Whether it's skinning something, throwing, carving, chopping off some limbs, or just enjoying the look and feel of it, I believe you'll be satisfied with this if it's all you can afford. On top of that, it's definitely fun to pull out. It gives you that Crocodile Dundee feel as well. You know, when you see a little knife, you can say, that's not a knife. You can pull this out and show them what a knife looks like. I like this one better than a lot of the Bowie knives that I have reviewed from Wa-Revo, and I've got some more hunting Bowie style blades to review in the future from them that are even bigger than this one. They put out the biggest blades. I've reviewed many of them so far, just monsters. This sells for about 45 bucks on Amazon right now. I'll drop the link in the description. So if 185 bucks is too stout and you like the design, maybe you can afford this one. What do you think about this replica of the Buck 124 Frontiersman? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Take care.